My next story is a Tibetan story entitled The Neighbours. Jambar and Tsering were neighbours. They lived in the high mountains of Tibet. Jambar was a poor man with a kind heart, but Tsering was a rich man filled with greed. One spring, some birds built a nest under the eaves of Jambar's house, and one evening, when he was returning from his work, he saw a chick fluttering on his doorstep. It had fallen out of the nest and hurt itself. "You poor little scrap," said Jambar. He picked it up gently and carried it inside. He saw that the chick's leg was broken, so, carefully and tenderly, he bound up the frail leg using a fine silk thread. Then he climbed up onto the roof and put the chick back into the nest. Autumn came. The birds flew away. Jambar forgot all about the chick with the broken leg, and whilst he was sitting at his table eating one day, he was surprised to see a fully grown bird flying in through the window. The bird perched on the rim of his rice bowl. It dropped a grain of wheat on the table. "This is for you," said the bird, "as a reward for being so kind to me when I was a fledgling. Plant it and see what will happen." Jambar was even more surprised to hear the bird speaking. He smiled when the little creature flew away. The wheat grain was not a valuable present, but he was touched to think that the bird had remembered. He planted the seed in his garden, and was astounded when the spring came again to see that a tall plant had grown from it. In the evenings he would walk in the garden and admire the plant. One evening he found that in every ear of corn there was a large and beautiful pearl. His kindness to the bird had been repaid handsomely. He collected the pearls and travelled to the city, where he sold them for a large sum of money. It was enough to keep him in comfort for the rest of his life. When Tsering saw how prosperous his neighbour Jambar had become, he was very curious. If there was a secret of gaining wealth, he wanted to know about it because, although he had plenty to live on, he always wanted more. One afternoon he went to visit Jambar. "Friend," he said, "tell me how a poor man like you became wealthy so suddenly. Is there some secret method of becoming rich that I know nothing about?" "No, no," Jambar laughed. "There's no secret." And perfectly openly he told Tsering about the injured bird and the corn that grew pearls. Tsering didn't wait any longer. He didn't even wait long enough to take a glass of tea with his neighbour, but hurried home as fast as he could. He'd remembered that there was a nest on his roof that year. Before going into the house, he climbed onto the roof and grabbed one of the chicks out of the nest. He flung the poor thing as hard as he could down onto the doorstep. He hurried down after it, picked it up roughly, and was glad to see that it had broken its leg, and then he took it inside the house. He tied the leg carelessly with a piece of coarse cotton before climbing back up onto the roof and putting the chick back into its nest. "And don't forget," he told the chick, "how kind I've been to you today." The bird didn't forget, and sure enough, in time, it flew in through Tsering's window, while Tsering was sitting at a table eating his supper. It perched on the rim of a costly china bowl. It dropped a seed on the table. "I brought this seed to you," said the bird, "remembering how you treated me when I was a fledgling. Plant it and see what will happen." The bird had hardly flown out of the house before Tsering was planting the seed in the most fertile corner of his garden. He watched it day and night. It grew into a fine, strong plant. But one morning, when Tsering hurried out into the garden to check on his plant, he was shocked to find that it was gone. A stern-looking man stood where the plant had been. He held a sheaf of papers in his hand. "Who are you, you impudent trespasser?" demanded Tsering. The answer came hard and cold. "You are rich, Tsering, because many years ago you stole all that I had. The bird made it possible for me to return now with full proof of your wickedness." He held out the papers in his hand. A lawyer was called, and the case was proven without doubt. Tsering lost his entire fortune. All the same, he was luckier than some people, because he had a kind-hearted neighbour. Jambar saw to it that Tsering always had a shelter over his head and a bite of food to keep him alive.